Hi, this is Arna Landrum, co-founder and campaign director with Daily Coast's Liberation League. I'm so happy to have joining us today, Ananda Thomas. Hi,
Hi,
Ananda.
thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you made time. I know the weather's really extreme down in San Antonio right now. How are you guys doing?
We are very lucky. We have gas heat and gas stove, so we've been able to cook. We have 5 friends, an extra dog, and a cat staying with us right now. But power's been on and off. So far, it's been on for about 14 hours, so I'm hoping it'll stay on all day because it is snowing again.
Okay, wow. Well, thank you again for making the time for us, even in the midst of all of that. So, I wanted to talk about FixSAPD, Fix San Antonio Police Department. Can you tell us a little bit about how FixSAPD got started and the campaign that you just relaunched last week?
Yes. So Fix SAPD started this summer, out of the uprisings from the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Our co-founders, OG and EJ, their brother and sister, were concerned as to why it is so hard to hold officers accountable for their actions. And through their research here, we discovered that San Antonio actually rehires 65% of our fired officers. They're returned to the force through arbitration or settlement agreements. It's the highest in Texas and one of the highest in the nation. And it's directly because of the way that our police union contract is set up, which is established through 2 laws, chapters 143 and 174. State local government codes. One is chapter 143. That's municipal civil service law. So hiring, firing, discipline, all of that. And there's a lot of really bad provisions in these laws. So officers have delayed interrogations when they commit an act of misconduct, a complaint's made against them. They have 48 hours notice before they are interrogated and have access to all evidence, written, audio, visual testimonies, to be able to review it before they're interrogated and create their story, which is problematic in itself. 143 also sets up arbitration. So that's the appeals process when an officer wants to appeal a disciplinary decision. Arbitrators are subjective, so they can make decisions like, well, I really feel like this officer was having a bad day and should be given another chance when they've used racial slurs against somebody in custody. It also sets up a statute of limitations for discipline. So if discipline hasn't happened, the investigation, everything within a 6-month window, that officer can no longer be disciplined for whatever that misconduct was. And there's a really bad case here. We had an officer, Matthew Luckhurst, who tried to feed a homeless man a dog feces sandwich. By the time everything happened and he was fired, the investigation happened, it had been closer to 7 months. So when he appealed through an arbitrator, the arbitrator, even though he said he felt that the discipline itself was justified, this officer should be fired, because of Chapter 143 and the statute of limitations, the officer must get his job back.
That's ridiculous.
Yes. And that's what's been happening for decades here. Due to Chapter 143, officers have been fired 2, 3, 4, even 5 times and brought back to the force. And these are officers that nobody wants on the force. They're dangerous
Right.
for civilians. They're dangerous for good officers that are trying to do their job morally. They're bad for San Antonio. So that's Chapter 143. And then we have Chapter 174, which sets up collective bargaining rights for officers and sets up our contract, really. What's really dangerous about this is that it has a provision in it that allows it to supersede state law, local law, ordinances, home rule city charters. So whatever is in that contract is above the law of the lands. What we discovered was that these laws can be repealed through ballot initiatives. So we said, all right, let's put these matters into our own hands. We want to rewrite a new contract, no longer dictated by these disciplinary barriers, these dangerous provisions, one that's going to work better for us and good officers. Well, first we thought we could just repeal 143, but then we discovered that if you repeal 143, even if you take that law away, because these are things that are in the contract under Chapter 174, the police union can still negotiate and fight to keep them in the contract. It supersedes the law.
All right, so I want to pause here because
Yeah.
it's a lot of information.
Yes.
And one, I was really excited to talk to you because I think we believe that a lot of this stuff around police not being held accountable is just police police culture. And I remember I was really surprised to find out that it's not just a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, unwritten policy, is that it is in fact very much codified in police union contracts and also the laws. And I think it's wild because you have all of these provisions. So if I understand, Chapter 143 is the provision that gives police all of these unfair advantages in investigations.
Correct.
And then Chapter 174 is the one that says the police union contract supersedes law.
Correct. And so it further insulates everything in 143 is insulated within 174, like an extra backup system for it.
Right. So it's not just a boys club kind of agreement. It's literally in the state law in Texas. And I know at least 15 or 16 other states have these laws that put police officers quite literally above the law.
Exactly. Yeah, they commonly refer to it as a law enforcement bill of rights. And so that's what it is. Now, it's interesting here because these are state laws that cities can opt in or opt out of. So not every city in Texas has this. They have to bring it in through ballot initiative or remove it through ballot initiative. We as San Antonio is the only city in Texas that has both 174 and 143. Other cities have one or the other. And it's really interesting to see they have far less officers being reinstated after being fired. Dallas has neither 143 or 174. They do meet and confer under 147, and they're the next highest for officers reinstated at 28%. So we go from 65% down to 28%, down to 12%. So there's a direct correlation between these laws and officers being returned to the force.
Right. There's a huge disparity in accountability when you can get rid of one chapter or the other.
Correct.
So I know last week that, on Thursday, you launched the official campaign for the End 173 campaign. Is that right?
For 174. So we
you.
were able to collect enough signatures to put 174 on the ballot in May. Goes on the next municipal election, which is May for us. We are still collecting for 143. It's a little difficult during a pandemic. Chapter 143 currently requires 80,000 in-person signatures, while the other one only required 20,000. So we just launched our campaign. We're revamping our website. We have a lot of folks excited. Our launch really proved to us that people are ready for police reform, and they're excited that they as citizens can do something. We don't have to wait for, contract negotiations where you get one or two things every negotiation, which happens every 4 years or longer with our evergreen clause. We don't have to wait to elect the right folks. We can do this now by repealing this through a vote. And people are stoked. We're really excited. It's just a matter of getting the message out there and getting folks to the ballot box.
So you have municipal elections in May, the ballot initiative to repeal 174. You guys are still going to be working on Chapter 143. I'm just thinking, you mentioned the global pandemic, and now there's this extreme weather event in Texas that's making the work difficult. So I want to ask a little later about the best ways to support with all of these barriers in the way. Let's say you do succeed. Let's say it's June 2021, almost a year, exactly a year after George Floyd was murdered. What happens then? What happens if you're successful?
Yes. So our current contract expires the end of September this year. They just entered into contract negotiations. But if we repeal 174, that contract is gone. We get to rewrite a new one. And we move to a meet and confer system, which is what most every other city and police department in Texas does. Dallas, Austin, Houston, they work under meet and confer. So they will still meet at the table to negotiate over wages, benefits, promotions, all of those things, which will still be intact because we want to make sure that any worker and any employee is well paid and has benefits. That's what everybody deserves. But now we don't have to necessarily have all these disciplinary barriers. Unfortunately, we will still be under 143, which is why it absolutely needs to go, so we can get rid of everything. But this is the first step to starting to have a say in what policing looks like in our community. Right now, these two laws are barriers in the way, and we are taking away one of the two.
Repealing Chapter 174 in your city and other cities in Texas can follow suit and do the same. This specifically isn't a move to defund police departments. That wouldn't happen, right?
Right. This is not about defunding at all. This is just about accountability. Now, there are a lot of parts of the budget that are under the contract. So this can allow for more responsible budgeting, but really at the end of the day, all FixSAPD is focused on is accountability through and through, better discipline, because we have too many bad officers walking the streets hurting good officers and citizens alike, and something needs to be done.
And being hired again and again. So it sounds like too that the police union wouldn't lose the power to negotiate, good benefits, good pay, workers' conditions. It would just shift the way negotiations are done.
Absolutely. Currently, with our contracts, besides the fact that it supersedes laws, it also includes an 8-year evergreen clause. So our contract goes for 4 years, then they negotiate for the next contract, but they have up to 8 years for negotiations to happen. If they don't like what's happening at the negotiation table, they can essentially take their ball and go home until next year for the next negotiations. Now, 8 years is the amount of time it takes for our mayor or city council to term out. So that means they have 8 years to work to put more favorable elected officials into seats and have negotiations favor them. And this has happened in the past. What we want is a system where the city and our concerns as citizens are the same as the police unions. Everybody wants our police officers to be well taken care of, to have great benefits, wages, incentive pay, promotions. Absolutely, we want that. We want the best of the best. But it's unfair that their concerns are always up here and ours are always down here instead of equal, when we're the ones that they're supposed to be protecting and serving, and when our tax dollars are the ones paying for them.
I'm also just astounded at how quickly this has been able to happen. You haven't been working on this for much more than 8 months, it sounds like.
Right. It's a sign that folks really want to see change. With the uprisings this summer, this issue finally became more front and center, right? It was re-energized and folks were ready to do the work. They spent hours and hours collecting petition signatures, talking to neighbors, doctors, friends, family, coworkers, because they really want to see this change. Almost everybody I have spoken to has in some way or other been affected themselves or know somebody affected by bad policing. We know that we can have a better, safer San Antonio, but even beyond that, know that this has the possibility to lay the pathway for others, for other cities in Texas and across the nation to take matters into their own hands and change their police union contract and reform their police unions. So we're really hoping that we are successful and this can take off and, give that glimmer of hope that I think a lot of folks are looking for right now.
How can we help? Whether we're in Texas or somewhere else in the country, just like me, I live in Minneapolis. I live quite close to where George Floyd was murdered. And so I'm really excited about similar efforts taking place here in Minneapolis. But how can folks help? Because what I hear is a lot of the work has to happen in person. You have a municipal election in just a couple months, and now you have to get out the vote for this campaign at a time where Texas is hurting really badly, and this might not be front of mind. So
Right.
How can folks help? How can we support?
I mean, number one, donations help. Our opposition is slated to spend almost up to $1 million campaigning against us. They've been spreading a lot of disinformation and scare tactics. And we need to have a well-funded campaign to go up against that, to get the word out, to be able to send out mailers, to do phone banking, to pay folks to block walk, to be at polling locations, to register voters. So the number one thing you can do right now is to donate to our cause, but we also have lots of virtual options that are coming up. We're going to be doing phone banking, text banking, relational organizing. If you go to our site, FixSAPD.org, you can sign up for volunteer shifts and trainings. You can be anywhere and call voters here, much similar to how folks from all over the country were calling into Georgia, right? So we are going to have lots of virtual options to get involved. Please donate. Please visit our website, FixSAPD.org. Spread the word about what we are doing. Get involved in phone banking. We're going to be starting that up next week. We were supposed to start this week, but Texas is frozen, so we'll get that going. But this is truly a campaign that has huge implications for police union reform and accountability across the nation. And we are up against deep entrenched interest here. It's going to take the whole community, the whole country, and there's lots of ways to get involved, so please do.
Well, I can definitely commit support from the Daily Coast Activism Department. We're prepared to help. You need folks to phone bank and to text bank. We can certainly help out in that way. And yeah, we'll see what we can do about getting some financial support as well. Ananda, I'm curious, before the uprisings this summer, what were you up to?
Yeah, so I just got my master's in political science from UTSA this May. Before that, I'd previously been involved in a few political campaigns for candidates for the most part of the Bernie 2016 campaign. I was a field director. I worked a couple city council races here locally in San Antonio. I worked in Nevada for anti-campus carry campaign, but then I came to San Antonio to be with family and to go get my master's degree. Politics are very frustrating sometimes, but it's very empowering, especially when you're able to win and win a change that you know is going to affect so many lives positively. So I know that I'm going to be doing this type of work for the rest of my life.
Yeah, the reason that I ask this because I've talked to so many people wondering what was it specifically about this past summer? There's so many folks who've gotten into police reform and accountability and anti-brutality work who'd never been involved with it before. And there's just something that sparked off here, just a few blocks from my house, that set off this global uprising. There were solidarity protests around the country, across the country, but also all around the world.
Yeah.
And I just was astounded. And so I was curious if you had already been in police accountability work. But what do you think has happened that has made this possible right now?
You know, I think with so many more folks that due to the pandemic were able to be home and to see this, it's very different. I know it's kind of hard to talk about, but there's a difference between a quick video where somebody is shot and watching a grown man crying for his mom, having the life choked out of him. It was so gruesome that I think it finally woke a lot of people up. Over 9 minutes. That's something that sticks with you, but there's been police reform efforts for years now. Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives started years ago, and I think it's been building up. And as people are becoming more aware and taking more videos and posting it and talking about these conversations, I think it finally hit a breaking point. But I see this honestly as the next leg of the civil rights movement. It has never stopped. This is still a continuation from fighting segregation, from fighting to end slavery. This is the next step of the civil rights movement. I really hope folks look at it that way and start thinking about it that way as well, so they keep moving and keep fighting. It's a long-term battle. It's a lot of uphill battles, but we can do this together. And we just have to know that this is a marathon, and we need to stick in it the entire time.
So I think I just have one more question, and that's if people are interested in checking out their own city and state laws around police unions and police union contracts, where would you suggest they start?
Yes, so most every city website or even your police department website will have your contract somewhere posted on there. And I would first go and look through the contract. Within the contract, it'll say what laws dictate the contract, whether it's collective bargaining or meet and confer or their Bill of Rights. That all of those have to be defined sections within your contract. But most city websites have them. Most police departments have them up somewhere. We have an organization called CLEAT here, which is like the state police union for all of our police unions. They have that posted on their website, but it's a lot of reading and a lot of doing research. I would look for other activist groups. There's police reform efforts going on all across the country in many cities, including work focused specifically on making better contracts and police union reform. So reaching out to local organizations, there's a lot of folks that probably already know, a lot of folks smarter than me that know about this work. You know, I know John Rappaport and Stephen Rushing have put out many articles specifically on police unions and their contracts and disciplinary barriers, a lot of scholarly articles that can really break down the problem and have case studies from all across the country, because this is everywhere.
Well, thank you so much, Ananda. A chosen mentor of mine, I don't think I've ever let him know this, said too that he thinks that this is the next wave of civil rights, in that the work that you're doing right now is taking on the unfinished work of emancipation. And I'm just so excited for what you're doing, and just best of luck.
Thank you so so much. We appreciate all the support. Once again, everybody, just visit fixsapd.org, find out how to get involved. This is community and grassroots at its heart and its core. So I really appreciate the time.